Warner lost its identity, which was like, imagine it's losing identity again. I mean, they'll keep the name Warner Brothers, but what if they, change it to like Ellison's Tech Bro Productions or something?
They're going to be making, Call of Duty the movie.
Yeah.
That's what we got coming down the pipe. No more of anything. And we're going to make a new movie every day, 300 movies a year, thanks to Larry and David.
Well, hello. Welcome to the Kinolime podcast. I don't know why I did that too, but anyway, welcome. Today is St. Patty's Day. I didn't even know I was wearing green.
We both didn't know.
You didn't know you were wearing green either?
I had no idea it was St. Patty's Day.
Wow.
I don't keep
But you're
up
wearing
with
green. That's
mid-tier
green. I'm
festivities.
colorblind for everyone at home, so I didn't know
I don't
this was
believe
great.
that.
No,
I've played Uno with you before.
Yeah, that's a lie.
You've won.
That is a lie. I have a very funny story how I found out I was colorblind. When I was in kindergarten, we played colored bingo, like, square, purple, this, that. So I would never win. One day I win, right? I'm like, I got them all, the shapes, circle, yellow. And I get up there, I go to my teacher, and I'm like, I'm so happy. I'm like, hey, look, I won. And she's like, John, you got everyone wrong. And that's how I knew I was colorblind. So, funny story. So today we're post Oscars. We got a lot going on today, but we had a really fun idea for a podcast. Actually, it was Danny's idea about what we're going to talk about today, which is Danny's favorite topic. It's always about mergers and takeovers,
media consolidation,
and we were talking about Warner Brothers, which is selling to Paramount, and it's going to go bye-bye.
Parabros,
and. But the history of Warner Brothers is incredible. So we're going to talk a little bit about the history. This is Danny called it a swan song. I'm calling it a eulogy to the greatest studio ever, I'd say.
No question.
I mean, hopefully it's not going to change. But D, for everybody at home, update us on the current situation with Warner Brothers and Paramount.
I think we can start on Sunday, right? Again, all these great original films from Warner almost swept the Oscars, right? One Battle, my faves, Sinners, Weapons. Again, just cleaned house. Again, they have the best studio execs in the business at any major studio. Mm-hmm. And in a way, as I was watching all of these, great original films, everything we want, bold original films, big budgets, auteur-driven, amazing stuff, I just kept thinking, there's almost no way this same team will be here in a year if this goes through. And again, there's still a lot of steps before this merger is actually completed. There's EU regulation. The FCC is going to be quick, but states are going to try to block it where they can. But realistically, it's going through.
Let's just say it goes through.
We say it goes through. Again, David Ellison from Paramount. Again, he went to the lot, and it was tense. Is the word. It's very clear. He is probably going to clean house. In this creative team, the kind of creative mandates they have are going to change. From what we're hearing, there's going to be less movies. That is going to be more IP-driven, safer bets. The type of things that anyone that would be watching something like this, your ear is probably bleeding.
Yep.
But yeah, so again,
everything is great.
Yeah, we're at a really weird impasse. I was thinking a lot about where the business stands and the history of Warner. And it's probably something closer to the 1940s, 1950s, right? Mm-hmm. Where there's a lot of upheaval. There is this new kind of medium. I think what a YouTube is doing, a Meta, and social media and YouTube, what it's doing to the business, it's probably the biggest cataclysmic change since television. Mm-hmm. In a lot of ways, probably bigger because, again, it's a different distribution model, and it also just has again, a bigger market share than the movies. So we don't really know where we're going, but we're going to look back to try to find out where we're going to look back.
And Warner's, there's some great books out there. I highly recommend. It's I think called The Warner Brothers. It's a book I would recommend reading that based on if you're interested in the history of Warner's. But look, it was started by some Polish immigrants. They were Polish Jewish immigrants, and they were, I think, from Youngstown, Ohio. And Jack Warner, I think, would talk about how we get into fisticuffs and fights growing up. They were like hustlers, and that sort of upbringing influence you could see later on the gangster films, the gritty films, and that's essentially their mold. And they started at the bottom. They were doing 2 reel Nickelodeon shows back in the day, and that's how they learned the business, by operating in these sort of, they called them the Nickelodeons, which is not the TV station that we know today. It was a little bit different. But that's how they learned every part of the business from the ground up. And then that's like how they kind of started their company. And then they started to make some swings, and they had a big headline hit in I think it was 1918. What's it called? Oh, My 4 Years in Germany. And this was based on a recent political book, right? So that got them to be headline movies. They were doing things that were sort of political and pushing it. I mean, talking about 1918. But the real change happened with Warner's when they went from silent to talkie with the jazz singer. And that, like, I mean, we wouldn't be where we are today if this didn't happen. We'd be looking at each other, and there'd be like a sign of our dialogue, in the subtitles.
Which would be great. I do kind of wish that was the case, where we went like blah 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 with our mouths, and then a little dialogue line would pop up.
But also,
that'd be way better.
We should try that. Besides transitioning from the silent era to the talkies, they also took care of the silent actors. They were like keeping them on payroll. They're trying to help them out. Like surprisingly, they had a heart of gold. And then we're gonna go into the history of Warner further, but that's kind of like the foundation to get a little bit of sense of like who the Warner Brothers were.
Yeah.
From like an ideological standpoint, but I mean, they just had going through this history. I mean, I was looking at the movies, which we're going to get into and have a fun time chatting about. Like this is the greatest movie studio ever.
It is, and it's why they're always so coveted. Again, they've been bought and merged 7 times since the 60s, and in large part, like you see it in David Zaslav, who led the last merger with Discovery. He sits behind Jack Warner's desk. Like, he really relishes, as most of the previous people that have acquired them have, in the legacy of the studio. Something that, and again, it's why this feels a bit different, just because of the technological aspect of Oracle and the Ellisons. But in general, there probably has never been a worse business decision anyone's ever made than deciding to acquire Warner Brothers, right? The history of these acquisitions is what John's saying. It's people that look back at this miraculous film legacy and like the entrepreneurial spirit that kind of, again, created so much of our culture. And everyone sees it as kind of like that last missing piece, whether that's AT&T, whether that was Time, whether that's Discovery. And every time, it usually very quickly fails.
Yeah, it does. And it's a shame. I mean, because of the history of Warner's and how, look, it's like kind of why typically, wealthy heirs can't surpass their parents, right, or father or whoever that was successful, because it's like hard to be in the shadow, right? And you now have Warner's with this legacy that that they like. Will they take care of the legacy? I mean, the Warners had the look. I mean, when the Warner Brothers and Jack and the future presidents, they wanted to preserve the Warner, like they were really into what it meant to be a Warner Brothers movie, right? It was dark, it was gritty, they used contrast, shadows, like that was their big thing. And like they also took huge stances, like I think there was a film in like 1939 from what I read, it was like Confessions of a Nazi Spy that like Hitler tried to ban because they were the most like anti-Nazi studio out there. Like they were taking risks with their studio, which you would never see today, most likely from a large studio that worried about the bottom line. They didn't care. They were trying to like stop Nazism, which was a good thing. And then you'll see later in the years like them taking some real risks in like the 70s revolution of cinema and etc. So I want to get into it. Let's talk more about Warner Brothers and their history, but we're going to go early. We're going to start here. I got a little piece of paper here. We'll get to the 30s. We'll go post Jazz Singer. How does that sound? So we'll start.
That sounds great.
We'll start where the talkies happen. For everyone at home, we want to get you involved. We're going to list a ton of movies, right? So like there's a litany. I mean, like pages of great films. So if we miss anything, don't crucify us. Go to our website, go to the comments, hit us up, like let us know what we've missed, some of the great films. I can't get it all, but I want to hear some of your favorite. We want to hear what do you think the greatest films were? We can go by decade, we can go by your favorite personal, but we'll love that. So we'll start with the 30s and 40s. So this is where like the identity was born. This is where Casablanca, The Maltese Falcon, Yankee Doodle Dandy. Like, this was the defining films of those eras. Like, I don't know, do you have a favorite from the 30s and 40s that come to mind?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of like for me, I think a lot about Howard Hawks. There's something I just enjoy so much about the kind of 30s Cary Grant movies.
Yeah.
I think Bringing Up Baby, I'm pretty sure was Warner.
This is like
Yeah,
the adult drama studio, right? This is like what was starting then
yeah, and
for the
it's
time.
like, it's just these kind of oddball, really snappy comedies that,
Yep.
again, it is in a small way like a departure from what you would imagine. Because again, like they have these kind of hard, gritty dramas, but again, the beauty of Warner Brothers is like, again, they kind of encompass most of, like, there's not a corner of the American landscape that you can't find a great Warner Brothers movie in. Um, in the 30s, like, they had Howard Hawks, who, again, like, he wasn't inherently political in a way a lot of other filmmakers were,
Sure.
but his dialogue, so snappy, all of his movies just, again, it's just like this warm kind of spirit in all of them that you would be hard pressed to find in a lot of other studio comedies.
And I love that you brought up the comedies, but what I think Warner's did so well in that era was these sort of, like, in a way, like we say now so much, the gritty films, but they really were gritty for this era. Like,
Yeah,
they
totally.
really were. They were crushing the noir genre. Like, they knew how to make these sort of adult-driven films that, like, no studio at the time kind of was making. And, like, that's where they were, like, edgy. They were pushing it for, like, the 30s and 40s, when all you think of, flappers and people just, like, enjoying life before, a massive war was going to roll in. There's a second one in, 20 years. But, they were known for sharp dialogue, like the cynical characters. It was like crime stories. Like, think of like that era in terms of like the crime story along with the comedies. But then now we go to this is the next section, is the 50s to 60s. This is what, like, I'd like to think is the transitional era. This is where they made their great, this might be my favorite decade. You have North by Northwest. I'm going to list them. The Searchers, A Streetcar Named Desire, Rebel Without a Cause. Like, this was like the era where you're seeing them start to own their identity and really work with filmmakers. And, like, again, these are some of the greatest films ever that Warner's made.
Yeah, I mean, like, is there one that kind of sticks with you? Because it's like a kind of like second golden age of Hollywood.
Yeah, this is like before. Yeah, this is probably like their golden age. I mean, this, like, for me, like A Streetcar Named Desire, right? Though North by Northwest, like, were my two jams of this era, because I think you see the emergence of Marlon Brando and taking, like, a Tennessee Williams play, putting it on screen, seeing one of the greatest actors ever, like, own that, and then you see North by Northwest, arguably Hitchcock's best film. I don't think it's his best, but some people will argue that, and, like, what that did for cinema at the time. The Searchers, like, who doesn't love John Wayne and, gritty Western, but there was just you should see how their stories were kind of all over the map.
Yeah, and it's something that's, again, like, the 50s for the studios were kind of like this big crisis point, right? Where TV, again, it's the emergence of television, and like pretty much every person that talks about movies now, it's like there's so much uncertainty of, like, how will we kind of move past this massive new calamity hitting the market. Like, what you kind of see with Warner is, like, the films you're talking about are wide and big, and I'm not totally sure if you would argue that's solely because of television, but you could tell, like, these are big movies that, like we always talk about now, like, we need big movies that you cannot just see on a small screen, right? You need something that really shows the soul and spirit of the theater.
And, like, the old system was kind of collapsing at this point. It was a transition period. So what Warner's was doing, they were backing these bold choices and voices. So now we're moving into, like, 2001: A Space Odyssey, Bonnie and Clyde, Cool Hand Luke, Bullet, The Wild Bunch, which is one of my favorite movies ever. It just was a risk-taking venture. But then something sad happened. In 1967, they sold the company to Seven Arts, I believe, which was a parking lot company. So the great Warner Brothers, this titan of filmmaking, sold to the Seven Lots company, and for 2 years, I believe 67 to 69, they were known as Seven Arts Studios. But in that run, they made, like, tremendous films. Like, coincidentally, it was just because of the timing. But Warner lost its identity, which was like, imagine it's losing identity again. I mean, they'll keep the name Warner Brothers, but what if they, change it to like Ellison's Tech Bro Productions or something? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, that's pretty much what it will be. They're going to be making, Farewell the Searchers, like Call of Duty the movie. That's what we got coming down the pipe.
And then later in '69, it sold to the Kinney National Company, which they eventually turned into Warner Communications. So like, it's just crazy that the biggest studio, maybe at the time, like would not only just sell but then change its name and then lose its identity like that. That's kind of sad to me if you think about it.
Yeah, again, it's fascinating because like the history of media mergers almost never works well.
Yeah.
But again, it kind of comes down to like what is actually so kind of specific and fascinating about Warner, which is like, again, it is a company that runs off of prestige. It acquires talent from prestige. It's why like there's very few people that, if you're a filmmaker, will sell your film to Netflix when you can get it instead on HBO if it's a TV show, or you can get it in theaters with Warner. There is like a psychological element of what this company is and what's kind of always been a pursuit of, that just since the dawn of, well, I guess since the 60s, has just kind of forced people to always be looking for it. No matter how much debt it will saddle with, no matter how many companies they'll have to spin off.
Get this guy going on merger talk. Look at him run.
Yeah,
I know, but it's sad. It's part of life. It is what it is. We're going to have one studio in like 10 years, just one.
Pretty much, yeah.
But so what's interesting is after the 60s is when this is the auteur era of Warner Brothers. This is where, again, Exorcist, Dog Day, the OG Superman, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, All the President's Men. This was where like they were taking risks with filmmakers. This was like, obviously it was the golden age or renaissance of...
It's like New Hollywood.
Yeah, New Hollywood, but man, were they making some of like the best movies ever in the 70s. Like really risk-taking stuff. I don't know, go pull up a list of the 70s. I want to see what you like.
What it is in large part is what Blazing Saddles, the Kubrick stuff, fucking Godfather, it's
And this is where the studio became known as like it's serious filmmaking. You're starting to see the identity of Warner's kind of like hone in now. We talk about this in screenwriting all the time. Like around your midpoint, you want to start zeroing in on your plot, your character. Like their motivation, their goal, their want is starting to become a little bit more defined and finite. And we see Warner Brothers here like having a vision like of what this studio is going to be. And that image is going to take it up until pretty much yesterday.
I think as you kind of look through the history of Warner, what it really is like it's routinely just like the history of like where, for the most part, the best talent goes.
Yeah.
Right. It's why it's so fascinating as a company, because again, we could look at specific studio heads, we could look at the history of the company itself, but what it really is like this is where, the best filmmakers go to make their stuff.
Yeah. And then those filmmakers in the 80s, we're going to lump the 80s and 90s. There's Full Metal Jacket. There's Blade Runner in the 80s. They've made a slew more. But the 90s is another decade that like just was popping off. I mean, you're talking Goodfellas, The Matrix. I'm going to throw this in there. Dumb and Dumber, Shawshank Redemption, Friday, The Mask, Austin Powers, The Wedding Singer, Rush Hour, Unforgiven. Like you're seeing culturally the great films of the 90s still coming out of Warner's.
Yeah. And at this point,
and all over the place. You go from Austin Powers, which was the biggest comedy, I think, probably of the 90s, and then Unforgiven, which is one of my favorite Westerns ever, that redefined the Western genre. Like, how can you take those risks? We see now all the time, studios have a mandate, right? They're going to do these certain IPs. They're going to have this vision. You see what an A24 movie looks and feels like. But this is a studio that's like swinging all over the place.
Yeah. I mean, again,
from Friday to The Matrix, like, that's insane.
Yeah.
Like in terms of taste and eclectic, shot the chances. Like I just find that incredible.
Yeah, and it's why I think like Pam Abdi and Mike DeLuca are so awesome as like the studio execs. Is like all of what is like really cool about Warner's history, right? Like again, making these kind of political thrillers that other people won't touch, investing in auteurs, and again, just big wide releases for movies that a lot of people can't believe got made. It's what made this Oscars so cool, was because it almost felt like a perfect amalgamation of like everything that the studio can be.
Yeah.
And yeah, like at this kind of perfect apex point, it's all gonna go away.
But what also I love about Warner's was their logo introductions to the movies. Like so I remember like Warner Brothers when I was a kid. I think it was like Tiny Toons. They had the
Sure.
Warner Brothers, and then they would bust through the WB. Like the WB, that was like a bit. You were not alive then, but or you were in diapers. But the WB was like where like the cool after school cartoons were, and then I just remember the Matrix logo with the WB, and it was like the wave of like the Matrix, like and then Dark Knight, which we'll get into. Like I loved how they took a logo introduction and made it something like you're waiting for. It's almost like 21st century, right? Like with the opening of Star Wars, dun, 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 or Fox. But they made it so they evolved that through the years, and we're gonna put up all the great logos of the decades from Warner Brothers, which I researched, and I want to know your favorites as well. Which is your favorite logo? I like the WB from the 70s. You're not seeing it because it's invisible, but when you go take a look, there's some great logos there, and I think that's like also fascinating that they really were all about their image and design and like what a Warner Brothers movie would feel like. Moving into the 2000s era, and then we'll kind of stop there because then 2010s, and I mean, we know all the great films over the last decade, but key films from the 2000s: Harry Potter, Dark Knight, which you hate, The Hangover, Ocean's 11, The Departed, Pan's Labyrinth, Best in Show, which I love, Letters of Iwo Jima, I don't know why it's even on there, A History of Violence, Mystic River. Like, again, when I think of Mystic River, I think of the WB logo. Like, they were making these great, gritty films, again, giving filmmakers the chance to spread their wings and tell their stories.
Yeah, and again, it's like that specific era is also where like so many of these massive, kind of like all this massive IP, kind of takes center stage. Like, again, the reason why this company sold for $110 billion, if you really look at it, is like, it's mostly because of Harry Potter and Batman, and there's a couple of these IPs that, again, are pretty much as valuable as like any other. I mean, like there isn't a studio in the world that even has a tenth of the IP that Warner has. Yeah, I mean, it is really fascinating to kind of think like, we don't really know where the studio is going to go outside of those big IPs. No. I am terrified because, if you look at a 20th Century Fox or even a Netflix, like there's what's so cool about Warner is like it's one of the only studios that doesn't have like, even if it's not outward, like some sort of mandate of the type of content, like at least like the principals would like to see. Mm-hmm. Very scary that we're getting to a place where like maybe we won't really have a studio that has like true kind of artistic freedom. Not that any of them, it's still a studio for Christ's sake, but like.
No, but you want them to have, and I think this is why we're going to talk about now the 5 influential films of Warner Brothers and how it pivoted the landscape at the time. So we talked about The Jazz Singer, right, which was the first talkie film that obviously put the whole filmmaking world into a new era. Then I would argue that their next influential film was Casablanca, right? Because that like sort of changed how they viewed character-driven stories. It was like a gritty sort of love story. It was dealing with a future war that was about to happen, that about the climate of the time. I would then say this is my 3rd influential film. If you're looking at the map here of pivoting, The Exorcist, dude. Like that was another sort of serious filmmaking in a genre of like that's still to me probably the scariest movie ever made. But it was like horror and philosophy together, right? Faith and doubt, and like to show like a priest doubting his God. I mean, and also the terrifying nature of that was remarkable in the 70s to like, or was it 1980?
No, it's like 73, I think.
In the early 70s.
Yeah.
And then Goodfellas, as the 4th pillar of the Warner Brothers pivot, like that took, again, it made a gangster film that we haven't seen before using like voiceover and narration for structure. I mean, it really kind of broke the mold of what a gangster movie could be.
Yeah, it's also something like we were having a conversation about Goodfellas yesterday, and about like I usually hate narration in movies, but like Goodfellas is just so kind of savvy with, again, like breaking the 4th wall and like how they employ voiceover. Yeah, exactly. Totally groundbreaking stuff.
And then their last influential film, in my opinion, is The Dark Knight. I know he rolls his eyes, but it really did change the game and
How?
how superhero movies were made.
What did The Dark Knight possibly
It was
do?
like it was philosophical. It was almost Shakespearean. If you ever read the screenplay, which is going to be on my list for 10 screenplays you need to read from Warner Brothers history, it's just a great read. It was an intellectual blockbuster that like we haven't seen before on like a superhero level, and you can't escape it. Like it really set the tone for like how superhero movies were made after that, and it's still the biggest.
But it wasn't even the grittiest Batman
It doesn't have
movie
to be
of
gritty,
that
but it was
decade.
like, but it was big spectacle, big themes. It was.
The animated Batman.
Oh yeah,
you know,
I mean, there's no question about.
come
that.
on.
There's no question.
That's why it's like that's like a mid-tier Batman.
Before we part, as always, want to give you guys homework. Right here, I got my 10 Warner Brothers screenplays that every screenwriter should read. I'm going to list them off, and I would love for you to read. These are all great screenplays that you can all learn a little bit from. We're going to talk about Casablanca first. It's possibly the greatest example of perfect character arcs that I can think of. There was a rumor I read years ago that someone submitted Casablanca as like Rick's Cafe as the title. They took the title page off, submitted all around Hollywood. This was maybe in the 90s or 2000s. Under Rick's Cafe, everybody passed on it as like an experiment to see like the greatest screenplay ever made. Modern executives would pass on that.
Did they just say this guy submitted Casablanca?
And apparently no one knew that it was Casablanca, which is amazing. Number 2, The Maltese Falcon. This is one of the cleanest detective scripts ever. Like if you want to write detective noir, like this is the script to study. I don't know if you've seen the film, but it's fantastic. Highly recommend The Maltese Falcon. Number 3, I mean this is on everyone's list, Chinatown. It's like described as like arguably the best screenplay ever written, rivaling Casablanca, which Warner Brothers owns 2 of those. 4th, as I mentioned before, The Exorcist. It's really like the perfect horror script that gets into that philosophical nature while fusing horror. Fight me if I'm off any of these. 5 is Goodfellas. We know how it revolutionized structure. 6 is Unforgiven. This is like, I mean, God, I would love to just rip off Unforgiven in everything I do. Like that and Heat are the 2 films I could rip off.
What about Speed?
For days. No, I'm not a big Speed fan. I respect Speed.
You love Speed.
No, I respect Speed. I do as like an action movie with like a 30-second elevator pitch, but it's not like one of my favorite movies. Get out of here. Then we're going to go into The Matrix, 1999. It was obviously one of the most influential sci-fi scripts ever. The Dark Knight, you got to read it. Please go read it. If you want to like, it's sophisticated blockbuster. No one writes like that. Jonathan Nolan. Then I don't know why I skipped that.
Nolan.
Yeah, Christopher Nolan's brother.
Oh, he wrote it with his brother?
Yeah.
I didn't even know that. It's awesome.
Blade Runner. We know that's atmosphere-driven storytelling. It's not one of my favorite movies, but I think from a screenplay perspective, definitely something to look at. And then for 10, I couldn't give you 10, so I'm going to give you 4 extra ones because they're like all tied. Dog Day Afternoon, Network, Mad Max Fury Road, and one of my all-time favorite movies, The Departed.
They're all, again, it's like, I can't really argue because you're right. Like, again, looking at the history of Warner is just looking at the history of great movies.
Yep.
And I think what we really came here to talk about today is like, again, we love these movies and we love the pursuit of these great movies. And we would really,
let's cue music, cue violin music.
Here's my argument, right? I know that in the next 2 years, this will have probably completely blown up, and Netflix and Disney and like Amazon will be picking apart, whatever comes from this merger, for scraps. That's really sad. I would like Warner to stay in one piece. I hope this merger doesn't go through. It's going to. May it at least have a few great originals.
Pretend this is Ellison right here.
Hey, Dave and Larry, look. I know that this is just one small piece of your, you guys own the entire world. You probably own my clothes off my back. You probably own the parent company that owns my apartment. You own everything. Good for you, I guess. Please just keep Mike and Pam in charge. You said you're going to make 30 movies a year. You're not. Maybe 20. Look, you're going to lay off like half the business. No one's going to have health insurance. It's going to be it's going to be like a full gig economy in cinema. You're going to destroy Windows. It's all going to be AI, goop. I'm terrified. Please just, make some good original stuff before you, throw a grenade into the last movie theater on planet Earth. Please, just a couple more good movies. You know, maybe employ us. You know, buy some of our movies, distribute them. 5,000 theaters. I think there's only like 4,000 something in the state. No, 10,000 theaters. Yeah. Let's vertically. You know what? I changed my mind. You guys are the best people ever. We're going to vertically integrate the entire studio system. You guys are going to own everything. You're going to own every news channel, every social media platform, every movie, all the IP, every camera. And guess what we're going to do? We're going to force movies down every person's throat. No more of anything. Just movies. This is genius. TikTok is just going to be short reels, verticals of movies. And we're going to make a new movie every day. 300 movies a year. Thanks to Larry and David. And I'm going to be employed on all of them. And I'm going to get a 10% finder's fee on the full existing budget of them.
Okay, we're good. That was really lovely. I'm moved. But we do want to just say, look at all these great films, right? Like, what have they evoked to you? Like, when I think of the Warner's logo, and I remember seeing Matrix for the first time in the theater as a teenager, like, it blew me away. Like, it blew me away. And I just want y'all to keep that going. Like, I know profit means a lot. I get it. But, like, make movies because people care. People actually care about movies. It helps them get through their day, their shitty life if they're having a rough time. Like, it really does. And it helps them, like, explore life through a lens like we just don't really get to see. Like, you know, I love books, but we know reading is sort of going down. Like, people like movies. Like, just keep the spirit alive, the creativity, give people shots to make their creative visions. I'm not saying everything's got to be art house cinema, but like, please take original chances on stuff that doesn't have to be always IP driven.
And as Timothy Chalamet would say, what's really important we do is we preserve the spirit of movies for everyone. This is not ballet. This is not opera. This is the working man's art form. Okay. So if you're a trucker, if you're a construction worker, get off your phone, go to the movies, send Larry Ellison a $20 invoice, get some popcorn. It'll be great, okay?
All right, but
let's keep watching
Warners,
movies.
We hope you stay around. We love you. To the best studio ever.
Best studio ever.
Around.
Keep watching movies. Keep making movies.
We're out.